Zara's arm was busted, blood everywhere, and Cody Reynolds just stood there smirking, like her life didn't even matter because of the color of her skin. Before we start the story, tell me, where are you watching from? And if these stories speak to you, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Zara slammed into the asphalt hard, pain ripping through her shoulder and side like a wildfire. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps, every heartbeat echoing in her skull. She tried to sit up, but the world was spinning, her vision dotted with red and sunlight. Around her, chaos erupted. Malik and Jalen were screaming, their hands waving wildly, phones out, trying desperately to call for help. "Someone call an ambulance. She's hurt bad," Malik yelled, voice cracking, with the siren of terror in Zara's chest drowned out everything else. That's when Cody Reynolds showed up, badge shining in the sun, boots clicking deliberately on the pavement, and a smirk plastered across his face. Not a shred of concern. Not a single hint that this kid, bleeding on the asphalt, mattered. He didn't rush over, didn't check her pulse, didn't even glance at her twisted shoulder. He just leaned back, surveying the scene like it was a show he'd paid to watch. And in that slow, deliberate movement, Zara felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. "You kids always causing trouble," he barked, voice sharp and cold, like her crumpled body was nothing more than an inconvenience to his day. Malik jumped, face red, shouting, "She's hurt! She needs help now!" Cody's smirk widened, cruel and unapologetic. "Nah, this one ain't worth the hassle," he said, leaning down and kicking her backpack across the street. Papers flew everywhere, honor roll certificates, student council paperwork, scattering in the wind like the universe itself was mocking her. Zara tried to focus, to push herself up, but pain and fear were dragging her down. Cody leaned closer, tilting his head, eyes cold. "Bet you wish someone told me before you got yourself in this mess," he sneered. Then he let the racial slur slip, loud enough for Malik and Jalen to hear. Rage, terror, and helplessness hit Zara all at once. Their world shrank to the blood on her arm, the papers in the street, and the realization that the very person who should have saved her life didn't see her as human. Minutes crawled. Malik's hands shook as he tried again to dial 911, trying to force Cody to move, but the cop stood like a wall, boots planted, arms crossed, smirking like this was all a game. Each glance, each movement, each smirk of Cody's felt like a hammer, pounding the truth into Zara. This wasn't just negligence. This was hate. Pure, deliberate, unapologetic hate. She saw Jalen screaming at him, trying to push him, but Cody sidestepped, shoving Jalen back without breaking his smug expression. The kids were losing it, panic turning to desperation, and still, Cody barely flinched. It was surreal, like watching someone in slow motion destroy hope. The air was thick with tension, the sound of Zara's shallow breaths mingling with Malik's frantic yells and the distant hum of the city carrying it all away. Then, a flicker, just a flicker, in Cody's expression. His smirk faltered, eyes darting behind Zara. But in that moment, she had no idea why. Nobody did. She was just lying there, broken, in pain, humiliated and powerless. She was Zara Thompson, daughter of Senator Rachel Thompson, a woman who had been ripping down systemic police corruption for years. Cody Reynolds had no clue. In that street, at that second, it didn't matter who she was. What mattered was the blood, the fear, and the cold, calculated hate in the eyes of the person sworn to protect her. Malik screamed again, throwing himself in front of her, phone trembling. "Move! Call the damn ambulance!" But Cody just leaned, blocking him, letting the words drip with venom. You think this matters? Nah, you kids ain't worth my time. And for Zara, in that moment, it wasn't just the shoulder, the blood, the papers. It was the weight of knowing someone could look at her and decide her life didn't matter, and she had no power to change it. Time stretched. Each second was a lifetime. Blood-stained concrete. Papers scattered in the sun. And Cody Reynolds was still standing there, unbothered, untouchable in his own mind, letting bias dictate life or death. Fear gripped Zara like a vice, and the world seemed to blur around her. And somewhere beneath the chaos, she realized something terrifying. In a blink, life could be snatched away, and the only reason some people survive isn't luck, it's power. Zara could barely lift her head. Pain shot through her shoulder and ribs, like someone was punching her from the inside out. Her vision blurred, the world tilting, but she could still hear Malik and Jalen losing it. "Move your ass! Call 911!" Malik shouted, trying to shove his phone closer to Cody's face. But the cop just smirked, leaning back, like he was watching a damn reality show. "You think she's hurt? Nah, she probably just tripped on her own mess," Cody said, voice dripping with contempt. He kicked another one of Zara's papers, sending her student council nomination sheet fluttering into the street. Cars swerved around the scene, horns blaring. But Cody didn't flinch. His eyes scanned the kids, narrowing, like he was judging them all for breathing wrong. Jalen stepped forward, fists shaking, ready to scream, ready to fight, but Cody's glare pinned him like a statue. "Step back, kid," Cody snapped. "You think I care about some spoiled brat on the street? Think again." His words weren't just dismissive. They were venom, every syllable soaked in hate and superiority. Zara gritted her teeth, trying to sit up, blood staining her sleeves, tears mingling with the grime on her face. Each movement felt like nails ripping through her bones. Cody's smirk flickered for a second, almost amused, as if her struggle was entertainment for him. "Ain't no one gonna waste time on you," he spat. "Not today, not ever." The kids were panicking, dialing 911, screaming, doing everything they could, but Cody was a wall. Every word from them, every desperate plea, bounced off him like he was untouchable. And he felt untouchable. Untouchable in his badge, untouchable in his skin, untouchable in his arrogance. Then the air shifted. A small noise behind Cody made him glance over his shoulder, a subtle hesitation he tried to hide. He straightened, but the smirk faltered. Zara's mind barely had the energy to notice, but something was happening. She didn't know it yet, but the scales were about to tilt. Meanwhile, Zara's friends tried everything. Malik ran across the street, dodging traffic, screaming at Cody, "Do your damn job! This ain't a game!" Jalen grabbed Cody's arm, trying to force him toward the ambulance call. But Cody yanked free, eyes blazing. "Don't touch me, punk! You got no idea who you're dealing with." Every word was a wall of hate, a reminder that this cop saw Zara as less than human. Pain, terror, and anger swirled in Zara. She looked down at her arm, blood soaking through her sleeve, and felt the raw weight of fear. Not just fear of injury, not just fear of pain, but fear of the world, the part of it where bias decided who lived and who didn't. Cody Reynolds didn't see a kid in crisis. He saw someone beneath him, someone disposable, someone whose life was optional. But then came the twist no one in that moment expected. One of Zara's papers had flown closer to a car idling nearby, On it, scribbled in a hurried hand, was her name, Zara Thompson. A driver in the crowd, recognizing the last name, muttered under their breath. And Cody's eyes, that cold, unshakable glare, flickered, just a flicker, as if realization hit him like a lightning bolt. For a second, the confidence that had made him untouchable wavered. Zara didn't know what he had seen, but the shift was enough. Cody straightened, but the smirk was gone, replaced by a twitch, a subtle unease. Power had entered the street in a form he hadn't expected, and Zara, barely conscious, bleeding and terrified, felt that the world might tilt for her after all. But not because she had earned it, because sometimes power intervenes where justice doesn't. The air was thick. Car horns, screams, the shuffle of feet, and the ragged sound of Zara's breath filled the street. Cody backed slightly, as if realizing for the first time that he wasn't untouchable, that he had just made a huge miscalculation. Every second dragged, stretching the tension, and Zara could barely move. But her mind was alive, registering the subtle shift. And through all of it, one horrifying truth lingered. The system wasn't designed to save her. Not this cop, not this street, not this city. But bias, cruelty, and hate had limits. And the moment Cody realized there was more at stake than he thought, Zara's story was about to explode into chaos, outrage, and a reckoning that no one on that street would forget. Zara's vision blurred, the streets spinning around her as pain ripped through every inch of her body. Her shoulder throbbed, ribs screamed, and blood soaked her shirt. But worse than the physical agony was the weight of Cody Reynolds' stare. He wasn't just indifferent anymore. He was a predator in uniform, making every second stretch like an eternity. "You really think I'm calling that damn ambulance for you?" he sneered, his words venom dripping onto the asphalt. "Nah, you ain't worth it." Malik and Jalen went insane, running back and forth, shouting, waving phones, begging, screaming. "Do your job, man, you can't just leave her here," Malik yelled, trying to push Cody, trying to break through the wall of hate that separated them from help. Cody shoved him back like he was swatting a fly, a grin stretching across his face that made Zara's stomach twist with a mix of fear and rage. Every move he made, every smirk, every cold, deliberate gesture was a reminder that for him, her life was optional. Zara tried to drag herself upright, feeling the world spin, trying to get the strength to scream, but the pain crushed her. Her friends' cries hit her ears like a drum of panic, and somewhere in that chaos, a small hope flickered. That flicker came in the form of a paper still clutched under her body. A page had her name, Zara Thompson, and something in Cody's eyes shifted the instant he glimpsed it. It was subtle at first, almost like a twitch, but then it hit him. This wasn't just some random kid. This was the daughter of Senator Rachel Thompson, the woman who had spent years fighting cops like him, exposing corruption, calling out abuse, dismantling the system that had made him feel untouchable. For the first time that day, Cody Reynolds' confidence wavered. That smug, untouchable grin faltered, replaced with a tiny spark of panic he tried hard to hide. Malik and Jalen didn't know why Cody's smirk faltered, but they saw it. They didn't hesitate. Malik lunged toward Cody, screaming, "Call the damn ambulance! Now!" Cody tried to wave him off, tried to push him back again, but his movements were stiff, hesitant. Fear had entered him, the kind of fear that comes when someone realizes their power isn't absolute, that consequences might be closer than they thought. Zara's body was shaking, blood dripping onto the asphalt, every movement sending jolts of fire through her ribs and shoulder. She was scared, terrified, and angry all at once. Cody's words weren't just dismissive. They were meant to humiliate, to remind her and her friends that, in his eyes, their lives were cheap. But that moment of hesitation, that brief crack in his armor, gave her a tiny spark of hope. Maybe this wasn't the end. The crowd had started to gather, drawn by the screams and the chaos. Some people had pulled out their phones, filming. Others shouted at Cody, demanding he do something. And the fear in his eyes grew. Every second, the crowd pressed closer, every voice adding to the heat. And suddenly, Cody wasn't untouchable anymore. He had to calculate, rethink, like a predator realizing the prey might bite back. But even with the tiniest shift in power, the injustice was still brutal. Cody Reynolds was still standing there, refusing help, spitting racial slurs under his breath, his actions dripping with bias and hate. He wasn't done. Every second that ambulance didn't arrive, every second Zara lay bleeding on the asphalt. The system itself seemed to reinforce the message. Some lives weren't meant to matter. And yet, the scales were slowly tilting. The moment Cody realized who Zara was, the street became a battlefield of fear, hate, and raw power. Zara couldn't move much, but her mind was alive, racing. This was the moment where the world she'd thought she knew collided with the cold, brutal reality of bias. Every scream, every threat, every paper fluttering in the wind was part of it. And somewhere deep down, she realized, sometimes power is the only thing that can cut through hate. But it's a gamble. One wrong move, and it could all be over. Time dragged, stretched, twisted. Blood, papers, voices, and tension swirled into a storm around her. And in that storm, one truth blazed brighter than the pain. Extreme racism doesn't just hurt feelings. It can almost take lives in a heartbeat. And today, Zara was living proof. Zara's chest heaved, pain slicing through her body with every shallow breath. The street had turned into a war zone of fear, blood, and fury. Cody Reynolds stood over her like he owned the asphalt. Boots planted firm, eyes cold, smirk still clinging to his face. But this time, there was a flicker of hesitation, a crack in the wall of arrogance he'd worn like armor all day. He didn't just see a teen on the street anymore. Something had changed. Her friend Malik had gone full panic mode, yelling at anyone who would listen. "Call it! Call 911! Now!" He waved the phone in Cody's face, fingers trembling so hard it looked like they might snap. But Cody leaned back, still acting like he had all the power in the world, tossing his head like he didn't even hear him. "You think I'm wasting time on this brat?" he said, voice sharp, venom dripping off every word. "Nah, she ain't worth my time." Zara tried to lift herself, wincing as every movement tore through her shoulder and ribs. Blood ran down her arm, sticky and warm, seeping into the concrete below. She looked up at Cody, her eyes wide, shaking, and he just laughed, a short, cruel laugh that made her stomach twist. "Look at you," he said, leaning closer. "All screaming, all crying. Don't mean a damn thing." Then it hit him. The hint of fear she'd felt before, the tiniest flicker in his smirk, became real in an instant. One of her scattered papers had landed close to the curb, and there it was, written in neat schoolgirl handwriting, Zara Thompson. Cody's eyes caught it, and for a moment, the world around him slowed. Recognition flashed, fast and sharp, like a knife slicing through his arrogance. Zara's heart skipped a beat, barely conscious but aware. He didn't know how much she knew, how much her friends knew, but the power shift was immediate. Cody's smirk faltered completely, replaced by a twitch, a nervous glance, a sudden tightening of his jaw. "Wait!" he muttered, voice lower this time. His eyes darted around, scanning faces in the crowd, searching for confirmation of what he'd just realized. Malik and Jalen didn't know the full story yet, but they saw the change. Cody's posture shifted. He wasn't untouchable anymore. Panic seeped into his movements. Every shove, every dismissive gesture before had been pure arrogance, but now, hesitation, fear, real fear. Zara's body was shredded with pain, but her mind raced. She felt it, the shift in the air, the trembling in Cody's confidence. Her life, hanging by a thread just moments ago, had suddenly become dangerous in a completely new way. This man, who had held her fate in his hands with nothing but hate and bias, now had to calculate. Now he had to think, and that hesitation might just give her a fighting chance. The street was alive with chaos. People had started filming, some yelling, some frozen in disbelief. The reality of what had happened, of Cody's actions, was spreading fast. And Cody knew it. Every new pair of eyes on him, every camera, every whisper chipped away at the illusion that he could act with impunity. Zara's blood smeared her sleeve, her strength failing, but the tiniest spark ignited in her chest. Hope. Not because she deserved rescue, not because the system cared, but because power had entered the street in a form Cody hadn't expected. And even in pain, she realized sometimes survival isn't about bravery. It's about who's watching, who knows your name, who can tilt the scales of fate when the system fails you completely. Cody's attempts to regain control were frantic, awkward. He barked orders at Malik, waved Jalen off, kicked papers again. But the crowd was closing in. People shouted, cameras clicked, and the fear in his eyes grew. He had underestimated them all. The friends, the witnesses, the weight of truth pressing down on him. The moment he realized Zara Thompson wasn't just anyone, that's when the reckoning began. And in that street, with blood on the asphalt and papers fluttering in the wind, one truth screamed louder than anything else. Extreme racism can almost take lives in seconds. But power, real power, can shift everything in an instant. Cody Reynolds had just learned that lesson, and the consequences were about to hit him hard. Zara could barely breathe. Every movement was agony, blood pumping through her body like a wildfire she couldn't put out. Her shoulder throbbed, ribs burned, and every gasp was sharp enough to make her dizzy. But worse than the pain was the weight of Cody Reynolds' stare. He had been untouchable all day, smirking, leaning on his badge like it gave him God-tier power over her life. And now, even after seeing her name, even after realizing who she was, his arrogance hadn't completely left. It had mutated into panic, impatience, and fury. Malik and Jalen were going full chaos mode. Malik was screaming, waving his phone, trying to film every second, shouting, "911, now! You can't just stand there!" Jalen was screaming right at Cody, trying to shove him towards some sense of decency. But Cody wasn't listening. He sidestepped, kicked another one of Zara's papers, and barked over the noise. "You think this matters? Nah, none of y'all matter." His voice was venom, dripping hate, his every gesture radiating pure bias. The crowd around them had grown. People were pulling out phones, recording, yelling, some trying to help, some frozen in disbelief. Every new set of eyes made Cody twitch, that arrogance cracking with every second. But he still held on to control, as if sheer will could stop the consequences that were coming. Zara lay there, blood seeping into the asphalt, papers scattered like mocking flags around her. She couldn't move much, but her mind was firing on all cylinders. She knew this man hated her for the color of her skin. He didn't see her as a kid in need. He saw her as less than human, someone disposable, someone whose life didn't matter unless it intersected with someone powerful enough to make him care. Then came the moment that split everything. A passerby shouted across the street, "Wait, isn't she—" The name, Zara Thompson, dropped like a bomb. Cody froze. The smirk was gone, replaced with a twitching jaw, rapid blinks, and a flicker of panic in his eyes. The crowd realized too. Whispers spread like wildfire. Someone was recording. Someone was filming. Someone was about to blow this up on the internet. And Cody Reynolds, who had acted untouchable, realized that suddenly he was exposed. Zara felt the shift even from the ground. Fear was still there, raw and jagged, but now mixed with a pulse of hope. The system had failed her this far, sure, but now the imbalance of power had begun to tip. Cody started barking, waving hands, trying to assert dominance, but every shout was met with a rising roar of outrage from witnesses. Every camera flash, a reminder that the world was watching. Her friends moved closer. Desperate, Malik's voice cracked as he shouted, "Do something! You can't just leave her like this!" Cody's face twisted, half in anger, half in fear. His uniform couldn't save him now, not with the crowd, not with the cameras, not with the weight of public outrage pressing down. Blood ran down Zara's arm, pain burning through her body, but adrenaline kicked in. She tried to push herself, grimacing, testing the strength left in her limbs. Each movement made her gasp, each blink made her head spin, but the fire inside her mind kept her aware. She noticed Cody's eyes darting nervously to the street, the cars, the crowd, calculating, panicking, realizing his world had just shifted in a way he hadn't planned. Every second stretched, dragging out the tension. Cody's bias and hate had been lethal, almost taking Zara's life. But now the tables had shifted, and he felt it. Every shove, every dismissal, every racial slur he had spat seemed smaller under the weight of realization. She wasn't just a random teen on the street. She was a senator's daughter. She was someone powerful, someone whose life mattered to people who could make him pay. The witnesses were growing louder. Phones waved, cameras clicked, shouts rang out, and Cody's authority began to crumble. And yet, even with the power shift, his bias hadn't disappeared. He still glared, still hissed racial insults under his breath, still tried to act untouchable, still wanted to crush Zara's spirit with the sheer force of his hate. But the momentum had shifted. The world was watching now, and that power, Zara's hidden leverage, had arrived in full force. Zara's mind raced despite the pain. Every second mattered. The bias that almost killed her had been exposed. Every witness, every camera, every shout from the crowd made Cody hesitate. And in that hesitation, in that crack of fear and arrogance, the story of extreme racism collided with raw power in a way that no one on that street would ever forget. The asphalt was soaked with blood, papers scattered like confetti, voices shouted, and Cody Reynolds stood frozen, cornered by truth, by witnesses, by the very reality he had tried to ignore all day. And Zara, lying there, barely conscious, feeling every ounce of pain, realized the terrifying, ugly truth. The system could fail you in seconds. But sometimes, just sometimes, power and visibility can tip the scales. And in those moments, hate can finally be called out. Zara's body was screaming in agony. Every breath a knife twisting in her ribs, blood soaking her sleeve and dripping onto the street below. She tried to lift her head, tried to focus, but her world was a blur of pain, fear, and adrenaline. And then there was Cody Reynolds, standing over her like some god of judgment, boots planted firmly, hands on hips, eyes cold and unfeeling. The very embodiment of hate and arrogance. "You think anyone's gonna care about you, huh?" he spat, stepping closer, leaning down as if he could intimidate her into surrendering her last ounce of strength. "You ain't worth the trouble. Ain't no one gonna save you." Malik and Jalen were screaming at him, trying every tactic they could think of, shoving, yelling, dialing 911, threatening to record and expose him. Cody swatted their attempts away like flies, smirk firmly in place, eyes narrowing as if daring them to challenge him. The crowd had grown larger now, some pulling out phones, others shouting, and every second the tension thickened, turning the street into a pressure cooker of fear, rage, and raw injustice. Then it happened. The pivot that changed everything. A passerby, someone who had caught sight of the papers fluttering around Zara, shouted, "Wait a minute, isn't she Zara Thompson?" That name hit Cody like a freight train. The smirk that had been plastered across his face all day vanished instantly. His posture froze, his jaw tightened, and a twitch ran across his eye. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't seen it coming. The realization was immediate, visceral. He had been untouchable all morning, deciding who lived and who didn't, based purely on hate and bias. And now the game had flipped. His arrogance faltered, his confidence cracked, and for the first time, Cody Reynolds felt the creeping grip of fear. Zara's heart pounded in her chest. She barely had the energy to lift her head, but she felt the shift in the air, the change in the tension. The power that had seemed so absolute, Cody's control, his disregard for life, his extreme racism, had collided with something he hadn't anticipated. The fact that Zara Thompson wasn't just any teen. She was the daughter of Senator Rachel Thompson, the woman who had spent years exposing cops like him, fighting systemic abuse, and calling out bias at every level. Cody's hands shook ever so slightly as he looked around. The crowd was watching now, their phones recording every moment, their voices rising in outrage. Every second that Zara remained in pain, every racial slur Cody had spat, every dismissive shove and cruel smirk, it was all being documented. And Cody knew that consequences were coming, fast. Malik ran closer, desperation in his eyes. "Call the ambulance, man. She's hurt. Badly." Cody waved him off at first, trying to act like he was still in control. But the fear in his eyes betrayed him. The realization that his bias, his extreme racism, could no longer shield him, hit like a punch to the gut. The tables had turned, and he was scrambling, trying to regain control that had already slipped through his fingers. Zara's vision blurred as she tried to focus. Pain, fear, blood, all mixed together, but she could feel the change in the air. Power had entered the street in a form Cody couldn't touch, and her friends sensed it too. They pushed, yelled, recorded, all while Cody's arrogance crumbled under the weight of visibility and the reality that he had gone too far. Cars slowed, people stopped, and a few brave bystanders moved closer to block Cody, their voices ringing louder. And then came the subtle but undeniable truth. Extreme racism can push someone to act with near lethal disregard, but real power, exposure, and the right leverage can shake even the most arrogant person to their core. Cody's face twisted in anger and panic. He had underestimated Zara, underestimated her friends, underestimated the crowd, underestimated the cameras, and underestimated the consequences. Every shout, every glare, every click of a phone camera chipped away at the illusion that he could act with impunity. Zara, barely conscious, bloodied and broken, realized something profound in that moment. The system might fail you, people might hate you, and bias might almost kill you. But power, visibility, and truth can fight back in ways no hate can fully suppress. And as Cody Reynolds' hands shook, as he glanced nervously at the growing crowd and the phones capturing every second of his cruelty, one thing became crystal clear. The reckoning had begun, and there was no turning back. Zara was barely holding on. Pain shot through her shoulder, ribs, and head, each breath a knife tearing through her chest. Blood ran down her arms and soaked her shirt, but worse than the physical agony was the suffocating weight of Cody Reynolds' hate. He wasn't just a cop anymore. In Zara's eyes, he was the embodiment of everything terrifying about the system. His smirk, that same smug arrogance that had made her fear for her life, had faltered ever so slightly the moment he recognized her name. But now, as he stood above her, his boots firm on the asphalt, his hands twitching near his belt, the balance of fear and power teetered on a knife's edge. Malik and Jalen were in full panic mode, screaming at Cody, waving their phones, trying to document every second. "Call the ambulance! She's bleeding bad, man! Do your job!" Malik shouted, voice cracking. Cody swatted at him like he was nothing, muttering under his breath, spitting racial slurs as if that could erase the cameras around him. Every word, every gesture dripped with bias, every action a reminder that, until now, Zara's life had been invisible to him. Then the shift hit. Someone in the crowd shouted her full name, Zara Thompson, Senator Thompson's daughter. Cody froze mid-step, panic flickering in his eyes, smirk gone, arrogance cracking. His breathing quickened, his posture stiffened. The arrogance that had made him untouchable evaporated under the weight of realization. The cameras, the crowd, the witnesses, all of it closed in like a noose. Zara, lying in a pool of blood, barely able to move, felt it too. The balance of power had shifted. Cody's bias, that lethal mix of hatred and racial prejudice, hadn't disappeared. But for the first time, he knew he was vulnerable. For the first time, the arrogance that had dictated her fate faltered. The crowd surged forward, phones raised, voices loud, pointing out the injustice in real time. Every shout, every flash of a camera, every insult Cody had spewed back at him like a mirror, reflecting the ugliness of his hatred. He barked orders, tried to reassert control, but the panic was creeping into his veins. For the first time, Cody realized that the world could see him for exactly what he was, a cop letting bias almost kill a kid. Malik ran closer, pleading, "Do your job now! Call an ambulance before it's too late!" Cody waved him off, hands shaking, muttering, "You don't know who you're messing with." His words were weak, hollow, lacking the power they carried just moments ago. The reality of exposure, of power being visible to everyone, had started to crush him. Zara's vision blurred, her body trembling from pain, adrenaline, and fear. Blood pooled around her, papers scattered across the asphalt, each one a testament to her life, her achievements, her innocence, trampled by someone who thought hate could decide her fate. Yet even in pain, she noticed the hesitation in Cody's movements. The arrogance that had endangered her life was flickering, breaking under the weight of truth. The crowd kept closing in. People shouted, cameras clicked, and the reality of the situation spread like wildfire. Cody tried to step forward, trying to reassert dominance, but every step felt heavier. He had underestimated everyone. Zara, her friends, the witnesses, the cameras, the truth itself. And now he was exposed. His extreme racism, his bias, his cruelty, all captured for the world to see. Then came the moment that changed everything. A police supervisor arrived, alerted by the crowd and phones blowing up across social media. He shouted orders at Cody, the authority in his voice cutting through the chaos. The realization hit Cody fully. He wasn't in control anymore. The system he had relied on to shield his hate, to excuse his bias, was finally recognizing the injustice he had created. Zara, barely conscious, could hear the chaos, the shouting, the sirens approaching. Her chest burned, her shoulder throbbed, and blood blurred her vision, but her mind raced. This was her moment. The moment where extreme hate collided with exposure and power. She was alive, barely, but visible, and that visibility had begun to flip the scales. Cody's face twisted with rage, humiliation, and fear. The bias that had almost killed her wasn't gone, but it was being confronted. Every camera, every witness, every shout amplified the truth. The system can fail. People can hate. But power, real power, visibility, influence, can fight back. The street was alive with chaos. Blood, pain, shouts, and the cold stare of hate all clashed. But Zara's survival, fragile as it was, became the symbol of the reckoning. The extreme racism that had put her life at risk now faced the consequences of exposure. Cody Reynolds' control was gone, replaced with panic, hesitation, and fear. And in that chaos, one thing was crystal clear. Hate may try to kill, but power and truth can fight back in ways even the most arrogant cannot ignore. Zara's body was screaming in every direction, shoulder shredded, ribs on fire, blood pooling beneath her, vision blurred from pain and panic. But amidst the agony, a shift in the air hit her like a wave. Cody Reynolds, the cop whose hate had almost ended her life, was no longer untouchable. The second the name Zara Thompson spread through the crowd, the arrogance that had guided him all day crumbled. He took a step back, boots crunching against asphalt scattered with blood and papers, his jaw tightening, eyes darting nervously to the gathering crowd. Phones were raised, flashes clicking relentlessly, capturing his every move, every slur, every kick, every cruel shove. The crowd's roar pressed in, amplifying the weight of exposure and accountability. Cody tried to bark orders, to regain control, but his words fell hollow, powerless against the flood of witnesses and the growing rage around him. Malik and Jalen were frantic, leaning over Zara, trying to keep her conscious, waving phones at him, shouting over the chaos. 911! Now! She's dying, man! Cody snapped back with venom, stepping closer, muttering racial slurs, his bias still raw, still dangerous. But for the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. Fear of the public, fear of accountability, fear of the senator's wrath. Then the sirens cut through the chaos, wailing louder than the shouting. A police supervisor and EMTs stormed onto the scene, forcing Cody back. Orders barked, people moved aside, cameras continued clicking, and the street felt alive with tension. Cody, for the first time, realized he wasn't untouchable. His power, once absolute in his bias, was crumbling in the face of exposure and authority. Zara's heart pounded, weak but aware. Every breath was agony, but adrenaline sharpened her senses. She saw Cody hesitate, saw the crack in his arrogance, felt the shift in the air. The extreme racism that had nearly killed her was being confronted, challenged, and undone in real time. Her friends kept shouting, recording, and protecting her, amplifying the reckoning. The EMTs knelt beside her, moving fast, but even they felt the weight of the scene. Cody hovered at the edge, muttering, but he had no power anymore. The cameras, the witnesses, the street, and the law itself bore down on him. A mirror reflecting the full extent of his cruelty. Zara's mind raced, processing pain, fear, and realization. The system that had failed her almost completely could still bend in her favor when truth and power aligned. Cody Reynolds' extreme bias had almost ended her life, but public exposure and authority had shifted the balance. The moment she was lifted onto the stretcher, surrounded by EMTs, Malik and Jalen flanking her, the weight of what had happened hit every onlooker. People shouted, "You can't get away with this!" Phones recorded everything. Social media would light up within minutes. Cody's career, reputation, and freedom were now in jeopardy, all because the extreme racism he had wielded, like a weapon, had collided with power, exposure, and the identity of someone who mattered. Even in pain, bloodied and broken, Zara felt a surge of quiet strength. She had survived bias at its most extreme. She had survived hate that almost killed her. And now the world was watching. The reckoning had arrived. Cody Reynolds had underestimated everything. Her friends, the witnesses, the truth. And it had cost him everything in that moment. The crowd cheered as the ambulance doors closed. Phones continued recording. Cody's smirk was gone, replaced with panic, shame, and anger. The extreme racism that had almost ended Zara's life had been exposed to the world, and there was no hiding it. Zara, bloodied, injured, but alive, realized the terrifying truth. Hate can come close to taking you in seconds, but power, truth, and visibility can fight back. And sometimes, survival depends on the moment the world finally sees the injustice for what it truly is. Zara lay on the stretcher, ribs aching, shoulders screaming, blood still seeping, but her mind was alive, firing 1,000 thoughts at once. Pain burned through her body, but what hurt more was the memory of Cody Reynolds' smirk, his racial slurs, his boots planted like a king surveying a kingdom he thought he owned. She couldn't forget the way he treated her, her friends, the utter disregard for her life. But now, for the first time, there was a shift. The world had seen it. The sirens faded behind them. The ambulance weaving through traffic, lights flashing, cameras following. People on the sidewalks shouted her name, cheering her survival, shouting at the cowardly cop whose hate had almost ended her. Phones were everywhere, every moment recorded, every slur immortalized, every kick, every dismissive shove captured for the world to see. Cody Reynolds' arrogance had crumbled, replaced with panic, shame, and the horrifying realization that his extreme racism had consequences. Malik and Jalen rode beside her in the ambulance, gripping her hands, tears streaking their faces. "Zara, you're gonna be okay, you hear me?" Malik said, voice raw. "We got you. Ain't nobody letting him get away with this." Jalen nodded furiously, fists clenching. They had seen the hate, the bias, the near-death experience, and now they were determined that Cody would never forget it. Meanwhile, Social media exploded. Videos of the incident went viral instantly. Hashtags, outrage, calls for justice, and cries of disbelief. People from across the country were watching, commenting, sharing, and exposing the truth Cody had tried to hide. News outlets picked up the footage, and before he knew it, Cody Reynolds was facing scrutiny at every level. His extreme racism, previously unchecked, had been put on display for millions. By the time they reached the hospital, EMTs were working quickly, stabilizing her shoulder, checking her ribs, monitoring blood loss. Doctors spoke in urgent, clipped tones, but even they glanced at the footage circulating online. "This isn't just a routine injury," one said. "This kid was deliberately neglected. That cop put her at risk." Zara's mind drifted briefly to her mother, Senator Rachel Thompson, who had already been notified. She had seen the videos, the cruelty, the bias, the danger, and she was enraged. But she also knew the moment had shifted. The extreme racism that had almost killed her daughter was now facing exposure, public outrage, and the very power of the law. Cody Reynolds, on the other hand, sat in an interrogation room, sweating, his uniform stiff and uncomfortable. Every phone alert, every news story, every viral clip pressed against him like a hammer. His bias, cruelty, and arrogance had finally collided with visibility and accountability, and it was brutal. He muttered under his breath, cursed, tried to justify his actions, but the proof was everywhere. The extreme racism he had wielded so casually, so confidently, had been recorded in excruciating detail. There was no escape. Back at the hospital, Zara's friends stayed by her side, holding her hands, refusing to leave. Malik's voice shook as he recounted the events to every reporter that called. He didn't care. Didn't care that she was dying. Didn't care that she was a kid. Just thought she was nothing. But we got it all on tape. The world's gonna see. Zara, barely conscious, felt the power shift fully now. The extreme racism that had been so lethal moments ago was finally meeting its match. Truth, exposure, and the undeniable fact that her life mattered. Her friends' voices, the crowd, the cameras, and her mother's impending wrath all combined into a force that even Cody couldn't withstand. As the night stretched on, hashtags trended nationwide. Hashtag justice for Zara. Hashtag exposed cop. Hashtag racial bias in action. Calls for suspension, criminal investigation, and federal oversight came flooding in. Cody Reynolds' arrogance, bias, and extreme racism had met a reckoning he couldn't escape. And in the quiet moments, as doctors worked and monitors beeped, Zara realized something profound. Hate and bias can almost kill you in seconds. They can break bones, shatter confidence, and crush hope. But visibility, power, and truth, even in the rawest, most chaotic moments, can fight back, exposing cruelty for what it truly is. Her body ached. Her bloodied arms ached. Her mind was spinning, but one thought anchored her. She had survived. She had survived the extreme racism of someone sworn to protect. She had survived hate, negligence, and bias. And now, the world knew the truth. Cody Reynolds would never forget that day. Neither would the witnesses, the crowd, the friends, or Zara herself. Extreme racism had been confronted, exposed, and the reckoning had begun. And as she drifted into exhaustion, there was a flicker of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, justice, power, and truth could fight back. Zara sat in the hospital bed, shoulder bandaged, ribs bruised but healing, eyes still wide from the trauma she had survived. The room was quiet, except for the soft beep of monitors and the low hum of the fluorescent lights. Her friends, Malik and Jalen, leaned against the wall, exhausted but unwavering. Phones still buzzed in their pockets, the world outside, tracking every update. Cody Reynolds' downfall unfolding in real time. The news had exploded overnight. Viral clips, eyewitness videos, and the footage of Cody's extreme racism had spread nationwide. Hashtags trended for days. Hashtag justice for Zara. Hashtag exposed cop. Hashtag racial bias caught. And every post carried the raw truth of what had happened. Cody Reynolds' career was over. Internal affairs investigations underway, and federal authorities were reviewing every detail. The arrogance, the hate, the bias that had almost ended Zara's life had finally been confronted by exposure, power, and accountability. Zara's mother, Senator Rachel Thompson, arrived at the hospital, her face a mixture of fury, relief, and pride. She hugged her daughter tight, whispering, "You survived, baby girl. You survived and showed them what happens when hate meets truth." Zara could feel the strength radiating from her mother, a protective force that had been invisible until the world finally saw the injustice. Cody Reynolds was in custody, facing suspension, criminal investigation, and a barrage of civil lawsuits. The extreme racism he had wielded like a weapon had been turned against him, and every shred of arrogance he had relied on crumbled in the light of public scrutiny. The people who had witnessed the incident, the crowd, Malik and Jalen, passers-by, became part of a movement exposing systemic bias, and the videos circulating online were used as evidence in multiple investigations. Zara lay back, still weak, reflecting on everything. Fear had dominated the beginning of the day, fear from hate, bias, and the near-death experience. But now, that fear had transformed into power, the power of truth, exposure, and survival. The extreme racism that had almost ended her life had been confronted, and justice had begun to catch up. She realized something terrifying yet empowering. Hate can almost kill you in seconds, but truth, visibility, and courage can push back in ways even the most arrogant people cannot ignore. Her friends stayed by her side, whispering jokes, trying to lighten the moment, but the weight of what had happened lingered. Malik said softly, "Man, they'll remember today. Cody Reynolds, he won't get away with what he did. Not now, not ever." Jalen nodded, holding her hand, voice low but firm. "We got it all on tape. The world's gonna see. That's the only way to make sure this doesn't happen again." Zara's reflection was heavy but clear. Extreme racism is not just a word. It's actions, decisions, negligence, and bias that can almost take a life in a heartbeat. But power, visibility, and truth are stronger than hate. Even in the most chaotic, brutal moments, they can flip the scales and demand justice. By the time she was discharged, the story had reached millions. Cody Reynolds' name was synonymous with exposed hate. Zara's bravery, resilience, and the unwavering support of her friends had turned near tragedy into a nationwide reckoning. And as she walked out of the hospital, still weak, still healing, she understood the lesson at the heart of it all. Fear may start the story, but courage, truth, and visibility finish it. Even in a world where extreme racism can almost destroy lives in seconds, survival, exposure, and power can shine a light on the darkest corners and make sure the world never forgets.